not sure where we left off because it's been a while. Where I last left off is I plastic gauged this. Got a 2/1000 clearance. I took some shims out. I'm going to bolt the cap up on here, and my goal is to take shims out until the crank locks up. It was turning. I just took a 2/1000 shim out, and we'll see if that changes things. I got some plastic gauge left on that I want to get off. I just lightly hit this with a razor blade to get this stuff off of here. Comes right off. The reason I want it off is when I go to rotate the crank, this wax will interfere and possibly give me a false lockup reading. Okay, now it came, you saw me measure the shims. I don't know if I showed it or not, but had 64 thou on this side, 64 on that. Currently I'm at 58.58. I was at 58.60 and the crank was still spinning. I'm just using the longer bolts in this until I get the proper bolts, because that previous video I yielded the bolt. I really don't want to use the impact on that. I just want to run it down lightly. I still got it turning, so let's put 80 foot-pounds on this. Let's see what happens. As I always do, I step torque everything. And the crank is locked up. Good. So now what I'm going to do is, since I only took a 2/1000 shim out to cause this lockup, and I had a 2/1000 gap, I'm going to blue the journal and torque this all back down again. I'll get back with you then. You don't need a lot of this bluing, just a little dab. But you do want to get it all over the journal. I should have waited until the garage warmed up. The crank is a little cold. Okay. I said not a lot of bluing. That's all we need for that. Okay, let's go set the crank. Okay, actually what I have done is I added that 2/1000 shim back to it so that I would be able to rotate the crank to get the die to transfer to the bearing. This is a lot easier than doing these rods, I'll tell you that. feels like it's yielding too. I cannot believe these bolts this big, these 1/2-inch bolts are yielding. Okay, just gonna give it a couple turns. I don't want to get too crazy with it. That should do it. Now we should see high and low spots on this cap. Uh-oh, what did I drop? I drop anything? No. So what do we got here? Yes, you can see it. There's no bluing. There's bluing. Wherever there's bluing, I need to shave. I'm getting it to loosen up a little, but I wanted to point out something to you. Remember I was talking about that taper? You can see it because the small side was up front of the journal and the thou bigger is in the back. And then you can clearly see it in the babbitt right here. So this is the block side. I'll scrape out this, and then that should compensate for the taper in the journal. So far so good. It's been minimal scraping. You can't see it too well in this. Yeah, maybe. I've only got one spot here that still isn't getting bluing transfer. I just scraped this bearing, so I should start to see it show up when I re-blue the journal and recheck it. Now what I'm going to do is I have some high-speed steel I use in the lathe for parting and cutting material. This is completely straight across, and my other tool is angled. So I know I need to take the majority off on this side and a little on that side. So how I'm going to achieve this is I'm just going to scrape this just like this, and you will see the bluing start to disappear. That is the high spots coming off. Got a good portion of it off over here. And the fact that this is coming straight across, I'm getting a good cut all the way across it. There we go. I got some bluing over here that needs to come off, but I don't have bluing here. So this is when I'll go to this tool and lightly scrape this bluing off over here. There's some bluing here, needs to come off. So for the most part, this is what I'm going to be doing for the next hour or so until I get 1.5 thou clearance and I have bluing all over the cap. Now, I don't know if you remember in the previous video, the journal was machined improperly. It had a thou taper to it. This is where I'll be able to work that out of it. I'll actually put a thou taper into the babbitt, and hopefully that'll solve that problem. Hey, I think I'm about there. I got bluing all over the cap except for This little strip here, I'm not going to worry about that, because that could be as little as a half thou. But I would say 99% of the Babbitt has bluing on it. Over here, I got this straightened out. I got bluing all over this, so it looks like I got the taper worked out of the crank. Well, it's still in the crank, but I've addressed it with the Babbitt. So I'm going to clean this up, plastic gauge. If I come in at 1.5 thou, I'm going to call it good with this, and then move on to that. And we all remember what's going on with the crank and the thrust surface and the pour machining from the pour machining crank shop. This is the deciding moment here. I've got good contact everywhere. I need to shoot for that 1.5 thou. Now the other engine I built, I had 3 thousandths clearance in there. That's just because I couldn't get parts for it at the time, and it is what it is. Be careful not to drop that cap onto it too hard. You don't want to deform the plastic gauge, and you don't want to knock it off of there. So if this number doesn't come out correctly, we still have 2 thousandths. Then I've got more shaving to do. Well, actually I'll take another shim out, and then I'll have to shave a thou out of it. My plan is, after a season of driving this, pull the pan off and recheck all this. I don't put too many miles on this car, just going from the trailer to the car shows. I think Greenville Village, look at it, you gotta be kidding me. I got another one that's yielding. There we go. I think at Greenville Village, the one year we put 50 miles on it just driving around at the car show inside the village. And last year, the way they had the gaslight run routed, it was like a figure 8, and everybody had to come to a dead stop. You got 800 cars trying to do a figure 8. There were a lot of cars overheating, including this one. I hope they redo that route so that it's an oval through the grounds. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Yeah, I can tell. I can tell by looking at it right away. Some of it stuck to the cap. There's my 1.5 thou. I got about 2 thou here, so the first 1/4 inch is 2 thousandths, and then the rest of the journal goes to 1.5 thou. And it's uniform all the way through the cap. So I am done with this journal. I can move on to that one. So that wasn't as bad as the rods. Maybe using the bluing helped me out a little bit, made it go faster than it did with the rods. Okay, onto the thrust bearing. I need to fix the end play before I do anything else. And you can see where it did not machine that crank correctly. You can see I've got a gap there, and then it tightens right up. So I've decided to address that by shaving Babbitt off of the bearing. It's only a little bit because most of that is in the fillet So we're literally talking about 2 millimeters worth of babbitt, less than that needs to come off. Just discovered something else. Once I get that done, or actually before I even do that, I need to address this. That is not a thrust bearing. They do not have the back babbitt centered correctly. It's already screwed in. Matter of fact, you can see where it's hitting the crank. Did this machine shop do anything correctly for the money I paid them? I'm not thinking so. Okay, these are held in with brass lock screws. I pulled this one out. They used to stake them at the factory, which is fine. We have Loctite now, which I'm assuming they used, and they did. So I don't know if you remember me talking about this bearing sitting high, and it was kind of rocking when I pushed on it. I'm going to show you why. What they should have done is put a dab of Loctite on this and then screwed it in. It looks like what they did is squirted the Loctite in the hole, and this is green Loctite. This hardens pretty hard. I don't know if you can even see it. That's about 30 thousandths high, maybe a little less. Yeah, I'd say less. Okay, I'll give them 15 thousandths high. Oh no, but if you add up what's down there. So what has happened is the Loctite is hardened, and when I'd go to bolt the crank in, it's going to cause this bearing to deflect because it's not going to want to sit flat in the saddle because the Loctite's holding it up. Don't you love paying for somebody else's education? They'll probably never see this video, so they'll never be educated. But what I'm going to do to this is I'm just going to take this over to the sandpaper area over there, or the disc sandpaper thing, and I'm just going to take about 10 thousandths off of this, 5 or 10, so that I can start using the thrust bearing as the thrust bearing, because this was being the thrust bearing. Amazing. Make sure I get it in the right side. Some hard stuff. I don't want to get it too hot because I don't want to start melting the babbitt. But I got to get enough of it off of there to where this is not a thrust bearing. There's a chamfer on here that I'm taking it up to. There we go. I think that's going to be enough. See, if I don't get enough off of there and that bearing, that crank comes forward, it's going to shear this screw, and then I'm going to just have a mess on my hands. I think I need to replace the sandpaper. Boy, now that I've cut into this, I don't know if you can see this. Look how thin the babbitt is here, and look how thick it is there. something tells me I'm going to be using the engine out of the other Nash in this one eventually. Okay. What do I do with the screwdriver? Well, it's right there. I got the block version of the cap fixed. If you see right there, we've got about an 1/8 inch that I put in there, so that's no longer touching the crank. I massaged the front of that with the deburring tool. And can you see? Okay. Am I cranking? Am I doing it the right way? There we go. I got about 4 to 5 thousandths in play. It's more 4, but the front face of that cap is so screwed up. I'm sure the high spots are gonna burn in. So there, now I can go set the shims on that. Another massive screw up averted. I can show you an issue with the cap here. I got it shimmed correctly, so I can barely turn the crank over. So I'm getting ready to blue the journal, but I want you to look at this. There is 0 side clearance. I should have thought twice about taking it to the shop. Well, actually, he told me after I took it to the shop that the way they break in their bearings is they tow the vehicles and start them that way because the engines don't crank over on the starter. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Oh my God. Okay, this is what I'm seeing here. Great contact here, partial here, and none here. These are both shimmed identically, and my smallest shim is a 2/1000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 2/1000 shim off of this side. Well, first I'll scrape this a little bit, then I'll take a 2/1000 shim off of this side, and hopefully that should center this in the bore or in the babbitt. I got the end play taken care of with the cap, and when I walked out here, or when I walked in here, it was raining and nasty. I just went outside to take a leak. Looks like the sun's coming up, or coming out. Lots of water puddles everywhere though. You know what I think I'm gonna do? I think I'm gonna call it a night or a day. Take the dog for a walk down by the river. See how many dead deer come floating out of the lake this year. We always get at least 1 or 2. Tomorrow's a trip to the doctor, so that'll be a wasted day. So, see you Wednesday.